Style. A fresh way to approach a dull or a dangerous thing. That's one of the lines that Charles Bukowski, the American poet, wrote in his poem on style. But I kind of like to treat that as a definition. Public speaking, unfortunately, can be both dull sometimes and also dangerous. And it's using style and thinking about style as a way that we relate to audience that helps public speaking really reach an audience. This is why style is not just an artistic consideration. That's what Charles Bukowski, the American poet, said about style in his poem titled Style. I kind of like to treat that almost as a definition. Public speaking, for better or worse, can be both dull and dangerous. Style is an answer to that problem of public speaking. On the one hand, public speaking might be dull because haven't we heard this before? Or, okay, what does it mean to me? And style, which kind of shows who you are as a person and your relationship to the audience and to the topic, helps answer that question. Here is what it means to you, because you can see what it means to me. Here's my approach to this, and that models it for the audience. But public speaking also has some dangerous elements. Maybe as you've worked through the position in your speech, you've recognized that speaking on this topic may potentially offend people. It may put you in a position where you might be criticized. And style can be used also kind of defensively or prophylactically to show people that there's more to you than just the position that you're putting forward. So when we're thinking about style, we can think creatively and artistically, but we shouldn't separate those concerns about creativity and artistry of speech from the effect of speech. But first, I want to talk about some of the simple editing techniques you can use in order to make decisions about your style in a way that are appropriate for online public speaking. Very few people want to go and watch a video that's a single long shot take of one person talking into a mic. Of course, nevertheless, there are a lot of people talking into mics on the internet. So how do they make that appealing? One of the things that they do is that they use editing. The jump cut is probably the most famous, or infamous, depending on your opinion, version of this form of editing for style. A jump cut, the YouTube style jump cut, doesn't look to remove some section of the speech. It's really just kind of the feeling of the jump cut itself. If we were to make a jump cut for every single word in the speech, it would become very annoying very quick. But there is something about adding in a little bit of editing that shows care and attention, but also makes the speech feel a little bit more energetic. I would say it's not a good idea to edit out all of your breathing. It's not a good idea to even edit out every speech filler necessarily in your speech just for the sake of getting rid of it. But you might think of it as adding a certain kind of rhythm or cadence into your speech when you choose to use a jump cut. So with that in mind, use your jump cuts not only in order to remove errors, but to add style. Another consideration when you're editing is whether you can make something happen on the screen so that you don't have to do it in your speech. So for instance, if you are talking about an article or a report that you read, you might be able to mention it very simply as in an essay or a report published in the New England Journal of Medicine or in the New York Times. Rather than having to read the entire title or something like that, you can just throw it up as a screenshot on the screen itself. You can maybe even use multiple images or even select a certain portion of the text that's illuminating to the audience. That's going to provide immediately some visual contrast with the rest of the video and will also unburden your speech from having the duty of having to say all of these things. At the same time, if you're going to use graphics that supply your audience information, you might have to consider whether the amount of information that you're providing is really going to be able to be absorbed by your audience in that moment. The more information that you give visually, the more you have to speak about it in order to walk the audience through it. You can't assume that everyone's going to see it the same way. So you might think about framing the images that you throw up on your screen. What's the audience looking at? What are they looking for? And use that as a way of guiding the speech as opposed to letting the visual direct the speech itself. But images can be used for much more than providing information to an audience. They can also be used to illustrate and to augment the emotional resonance of some aspect of your speech, whether it's an example, a narrative, a thought experiment, where if you show us something, let's say, here's what it looks like when an ecological system is devastated by algae. That's going to give us a different sense than just hearing it described. So forming your speech around images is one way you might think about adding style and polish to the final version of your speech. You probably have already encountered images in preparing for your work. So now it's time to go back and say, what are the images that most affected me? Can I bring those images in for my audience in some way? Finally, you might incorporate time-based media, whether that's recorded audio or recorded video. This is going to be a much richer version of your speech if you're able to do that. So let's say you're talking about an interview with someone like Elon Musk. If you include a clip of the interview, that's going to change how people relate to the speech. It's going to add an element of stylistic interest, but also of a different sense of how you came to this material. And the reality of that recording is going to have a different evidentiary effect for many audiences than if you were to just report it in speech, even if the words themselves are exactly the same. Same thing with video. If you can show us a clip of what you're talking about, or an example of what you're talking about, that's going to add a dimension of interest that you're not usually going to see.